Wendy has a particular interest in cultural and linguistic competence, literacy and health literacy, and community engagement and family involvement. And that is kind of part of what she's going to speak to you guys about today in this session, and then similar themes in her afternoon breakout, where she'll also be joining us virtually. So what we'd like to do is let Wendy say a little bit about herself, and then so she feels a little more with us in the room, we were hoping we could go around and just briefly introduce who we are so she has an idea. And if you're more towards the back, if you wouldn't mind just standing up and coming up a little closer so Wendy can see you in the webcam. We thought that would be a good way to build a little more community in the room for everybody. So everybody welcome Wendy Jones.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you. This is so interesting, and I'm hoping that it's going to be a fun conversation that we're going to have today. I think that Bronwyn said gave you a lot of information. I'd kind of like to know how many of you are familiar with the work of the National Center for Cultural Competence. Raise your hand. Oh, okay, great. Sometimes when I ask that, the room, there's no hands up, so this feels good. And so actually, the presentation or the conversation, let's say, that I'm hoping that we'll have right now is really the result of ongoing discussion with different people around some of the difficulties associated with collecting race, ethnicity, and language data. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can. And so really, there's a lot of wonderful tools that are available, and a lot of opportunity to sort of set the tone with yourselves as well as with others in your organization so that there is a level of comfort in asking those questions and to sort of prepare you and give you, I'll say not a speech, but there are scripts available to help you think through how you will share with families and individuals why you're asking them this really important information. So, actually, can you hear any sounds going on other than my voice?
The printer.
Yeah, there's kind of a knocking or something in the background.
Yeah, it's the printer. I'm gonna shut it down. It's not finished printing. It's very slow, but I'm gonna shut it down, and I think I know where I'm going without it. So.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I thought maybe you had some construction going on or something.
Well, not today, but.
So while it's printing, Wendy, why don't we go around and do introductions so you have an idea of who's in the room? You want to do that?
That sounds great.
Okay. Well, why don't we just start over on this side of the room? I'm going to hold up the webcam, so it'll be a little shaky here for you, Wendy, so you can see these people. And
Albino Sandoval with Ethics in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
I'm sorry.
Albino Sandoval with Ethics from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay.
I'm Mark Smith. We've met Wendy, but I'm the board president of the Nebraska Parent Training and Information Center.
Okay.
Hi, Wendy. JC Trammett. We've had a lot of email and phone
Hi,
conversations.
JC. Nice to see you.
You too. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Rachel Banning, Families Together, Wichita, Kansas.
go ahead, Bob.
Bobby Thurston from Cluck in Billings.
Okay, we'll go over to this side.
Glenda Davis with PTI Nebraska, and we have the Family to Family Health and Information Center. So we've met some time ago.
Okay.
Sharon Orduña, Outreach Coordinator at PTI Nebraska.
Hi, Sharman Davis Barrett at the National Parent Technical Assistance Center at Pacer Center, Minnesota.
Graciela Sharif with the Parent Training and Information in Nebraska.
Would you say your name one more time?
Graciela.
That's what I thought you said. I'm writing it down so I can call you by name. Huh? I used to be a teacher, so I have that habit.
Okay. Hi.
No worries, though.
Hi, I'm Connie Zinkevich. I'm with Families Together, and like PTI Nebraska, our project also has the Family to Family Health Information Center for Kansas.
And for the rest of you, if you maybe come up through this gap here and then introduce yourselves there, then go around and then back. Yeah, model behavior.
Hello. Hi, it's Phil Moses from CADRE, the National Center on Dispute Resolution and Special Education.
What state?
We're a national TA center.
Okay.
But they're in Eugene.
Okay.
Come on up, everybody. You can all stand up. You don't have to just sit. We'll just make a line. Come on up. We'll make it quick. This is just like school again.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kathy Harstead, and
come up further.
Further. Okay.
Yeah, further. It's nice to be able to see you.
Hi.
There.
And hi.
Hi, I'm Kathy Harstead, and I'm with the North Dakota Parent Training and Information Center, Pathfinder. We have 5 American Indian reservations located within the borders of our state. Plus, our largest city is refugee resettlement area for Lutheran Social Service. So they speak 52 different languages in the public schools there. We have lots of outreach challenges. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you also.
Larry Fuller, Parents Reaching Out, New Mexico.
Thanks, Larry.
I'm Cheryl Craze with South Dakota Parent Connection, and we have the PTI and the Family to Family in the Parent Center.
Thank you.
Patricia Maycutt from Peak Parent Center, Colorado Springs.
Good morning, Wendy. I'm Joyce Millard Hoy from Phoenix, Arizona, and Raising Special Kids is the Arizona PTI as well as the Family to Family Health Information Center. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Tammy Schwant with Families Together out of Garden City, Kansas, which is rural western rural part of the state, and that's the Kansas PTI.
Nice to meet you.
Good morning, I'm Yolanda Cora. I'm a bilingual information specialist for the Parent Center in Garden City, Kansas.
Hello, Tanya Crawley, Peak Parent Center, Colorado Springs.
Can you repeat your name, please?
Tanya Crawley.
Thank you.
I'm Pam Christie, Peak Parent Center in Colorado.
I'm Shirley Swope with Peak Parent Center in Colorado.
She's my voice.
And I'm Helen Post with Utah Parent Center.
I'm sorry, you're going.
Helen Post.
Thank you.
Utah.
Don't have a voice today, sorry.
Thank you.
Good morning, Wendy. My name is Gabriela Perez, and I'm with the Denver Metro Community Parent Resource Center in Aurora, Colorado.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, wonderful to know all of your names. And believe me, I did write down next to me so that I can not just call on you, but it feels more like I'm there with you, if you know what I mean. So then let's get started. Roger.
Okay, I'm on the title slide. You just tell me when to advance.
You can advance.
Okay.
It looks blank.
Yeah, your text is kind of small, but it's your cultural competence requires organizations to.
Okay, that's great. So I think I would like to use cultural and linguistic competence as the frameworks for our discussion. So when we're thinking about cultural competence and engaging with families in order to not just provide services or not just to collect this data, but to get a sense of who they are, and because of the sense of who they are really helps us to tailor our tasks and initiatives towards really meeting their needs to the best of our own ability. And so when we think about cultural and linguistic competence, there are definitely certain aspects or characteristics that we look forward to. So when we're thinking about cultural competence, we're talking about having a clear set of values and principles and behaviors and attitudes and supporting policies committees, teams that help us to really work as effectively as we can in cross-cultural situations. And so if we use, for example, say, this whole theme of language access or trying to be able to meet the needs of families, we'd have to have a policy that stated really what our organization values around interactions with families for whom English might not be their primary language or for whom speaking might not be the primary way of communicating. And if you have those policies in place, it would actually say exactly how you value and what steps you're willing to take in order to ensure meaningful engagement or meaningful involvement with that group of individuals or with all groups of individuals that happen to fit under the umbrella of having a language or communication need. And then that you would have some level of structure, be it your budget line items, to A, trying to discern what the language needs are, and B, trying to meet those language needs. So perhaps it would be a budget line item that says for translation or for interpretation, whether it's sign or foreign language. Perhaps it might be a budget line item that says that you would provide large print or enhanced documents so that people would be able to read them, or that if you had families who required transliteration to Braille, that you have that in a line item so that you'd be able to pay for that. So the line item or a structure, a team that is in charge of either ensuring for language access or ensuring that you're collecting, in this case, data that's going to help to support you. All of those pieces that would support the policy. And then, of course, the behaviors and attitudes really underscoring exactly how you're going to walk the walk or walk the talk, and that it would be displayed in specific behaviors. And one behavior might be that everyone would know how to access services and supports for those for whom English is not their primary language, or who might need speech or might Braille or might need whatever the adaptation is. So always having these values and principles in a policy, and then being able to support that policy through teams, money, fiscal allocations, through the way that you conduct yourselves within individuals and families. And then always these other 5 pieces underneath are always key to be able to value diversity. What does it mean to your organization and yourself as an individual? The idea that people are different and those differences have a significance on the way that they accept your services and supports, the way that they interact with you, as well as the way that you interact with them. Always being able to take a look at yourself, so some self-reflection, but also to conduct organizational assessment to see really how well are you doing at the task at hand in terms of serving diverse clients. And what are your areas of strength, and how can you capitalize on those areas of strength, as well as looking at your areas of growth. And the next piece is really critical, is being prepared for those differences in either how people understand your outreach strategies, how people understand what services you have to offer, and be prepared with sort of like a toolkit of ways to manage the dynamics of difference, meaning that when people come together, they have different understandings, different values and perspectives, being able to mitigate those with some skills and some activities that will help to make the match as best as it can be. Always looking forward to, not just on an individual level acquiring cultural knowledge, but on the institutional or organizational level. Being able to learn as much as you can on an ongoing basis and sort of put it in the institution. What are some of the community resources? Who are some of, say, if we take for instance, tribal entity that you might be trying to join with, to either provide information or provide better services. Who are the key people that you need to, who are the credible voices within that community, within that tribal organization, that you need to have partnerships with, or who even may need to know about what you offer in order to help with your engagement strategies within that community or within that tribal entity. So always, not just having one person who has that knowledge, but having that knowledge be shared amongst all folk in the organization so they're the ones that are able to address those needs. And then adapting to meet the needs or the context of the communities you're engaging with or that your work serving. So what does that mean? So for an example, in some communities, there's a knowledge that people are working multiple jobs. Then it might mean having some hours that are a little late so that people can actually access. Or some communities have responded by having a person who has a cell phone. The cell phone number is available for after hours so that families never get recording or never are able to tap in or make a connection with your organization. And so the key piece is then incorporate all of those things that we've discussed, the policies, the attitudes, the behaviors, the line items, the fiscal resources, personnel resources, and all those 5 elements that we just discussed, having that available and in action in all levels of your organization, in terms of policymakers, administrators, the people who are doing direct front desk folks who maybe are the first points of contact, the families themselves, and the communities that you're seeking to serve. So, advance, please.
Okay.
So, getting on the same page is what I'm hoping that will do. And to do that, we're going to look at some of the definitions that really are specifically related to race, ethnicity, language, and the collection of data. So we can advance.
Okay.
So when we think about race, there are a number of definitions for race, and I'm giving you 3 on this slide and the other, the next time. So for all purposes, race is really a socially defined idea, really in place so that we can categorize people by their physical characteristics. That's a definition that the National Center for Cultural Competence uses. And then the dictionary tells us that race refers to a class or a kind of people that are unified by shared interests, habits, and or other characteristics. You may advance. The IOM report, which is specifically the one from 1999, really gives us another perspective on race, that it talks about race, again, being that social and a cultural construct, and that as such, it's a contrast human viability based on perceived differences in not only appearance and behavior, but also biology. The IOM also increases this definition by talking about race as having the capacity to set false premises about the natural differences in individuals based upon significant biological and behavioral differences. And so that most of the time when we think about race, we think about sort of in the US, black, white, you hear sometimes red to represent Native American, you hear sometimes now brown to represent Hispanic, and also yellow to represent Asian, as well as white. So when we think about those racial categories, they're not always that helpful in helping us to plan for or to plan for services and supports or to be able to provide services. Probably key thing that I want to go away from this whole conversation about race is the fact that it doesn't give you enough information. It might help you to make some generalizations about individuals, but the key is that for every individual that maybe share the same racial background, there are so many within group differences that really sort of force us to have to individualize the way that we approach our ideas of race and what it means, the significance of race in terms of engaging. engaging and interacting with different individuals from diverse backgrounds. So you may advance to the next slide.
Okay.
In terms of ethnicity, we're talking about having a specific ethnic affiliation or equality. And this is really looking at groups or populations of people who are classified based upon common racial, national, tribal, religious, linguistic, or cultural origins. So if you think about that for a minute, and the census and other organizations tend to group individuals, again, by race and ethnicity. So when we think about ethnicity, the census really has only one ethnicity, and that's Hispanic or non-Hispanic. But when you move towards breaking that down even into a more granular or smaller level, think about the number of countries that, if you wanted to think about people being of Hispanic or Latino origin, how many countries do you think are really truly represented in that mixture? You can't answer. How many countries?
10.
I'm sorry?
10.
Go large or go bigger?
300.
50.
I'm sorry?
300.
No, go smaller. Let me stop with history. Actually, about 26 different countries, right? So when you think about somebody had 26, you can see, excellent. So when you think about those individual countries and the differences between, for example, how the language is spoken, right? Even take one of those countries and think about the differences and how the language is spoken from people who live in the hills, people who live in the city, people who are highly educated, people who are less educated, people who didn't have the chance to go to school. And along with language comes a host of other cultural understandings or ways of interacting. Think about the US, for example. So we all speak English in the US, right, as that's our national language. However, think about how English is spoken in different parts of this country. I'm not talking just about the difference between urban, suburban, rural, but every state has its own way of speaking English, right? With different connotations and different sayings and different intonations and inflections and accents, right? I'm from New York. Most people say it only comes out when I get upset. Accent that everyone expects comes out then. But if I think about just the difference in the way that we speak English in New York City, in the different boroughs, people from different backgrounds, the way their language of origin impacts the way that they speak English, and what I experienced when I went upstate to Buffalo, and the whole different way that the language is spoken there, that ethnicity plays a huge role in the way that we speak a language, understand each other, interact with each other from a language standpoint. So just want to think about when we talk about ethnicity that it's a whole nother can of, not worms, but can of goodies, let's say, that meets the eyes. We can't just classify people by that one perspective of being Hispanic or being Asian. Well, the same thing would apply in that way, that the numbers of Asian groups is huge. And knowing that they're Asian provides a piece of information, but would be more important to know specifically what the ethnicity is in order to be able to move forward and be in the ways that you engage and the ways that you would provide services and or information. So I wanted to let you know that I'm hoping that you feel free to ask questions and to comment. Don't necessarily want you to wait till the end, okay? Does that work for you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
See some heads. I'm going to take that in everybody. Okay, you may advance to the next slide.
More definitions.
Okay. So when we think about ethnicity, and all the conversations that we've just had, we're really looking at how a person understands themselves, how they see themselves, as well as how they're seen by the rest of the world, right? We're talking about ethnicity being sort of a marker that sort of helps you with your belonging to a specific group. It's usually based upon your ancestry, but also sharing of a common destiny. So a lot now in the literature, you will see the acronym REL. And REL really refers back to race, ethnicity, and language. Next slide.
Okay.
So you've heard me mention the word grandeur before. And grandeur, again, it's when so the definition here is talking about ethnicity or origin, where you descend from, your roots, your heritage. But when we're talking about granular information here in the US in terms of collecting this data, so to say to somebody, or for someone to say when you ask them, what is your race? And perhaps they say Black or African American. And then you would ask them, what's your ethnicity, right? Because the perspective used to be that the Black or African American community here in the US was everyone who can trace their heritage back to arrival during slave times. But the data from the census tells us that the population of foreign-born Black individuals in this country and families is huge. Has grown since the 80s, during the 90s, and also in 2000 as people come not always only as refugees, but also come as immigrants. So that to ask someone what their race is, and to hear Black, there is a need to go deeper to a more granular level to find out, okay, Black, but what's your ancestry? What's your heritage? Did you come to the United States recently? Where did you come from? That granular ethnic data gives you much more to go by in terms of making linkages to resources, understanding, or being able to start the dialogue to help you to understand some of the cultural factors that may come into play as you are supporting this family in whatever their need or preference may be. So if we'll go to the next slide.
Okay.
So when we're talking about language, definitions of language, actually it looks like there are 4 real critical pieces for us to consider as we're trying to assist or trying to find out what language ability or language people speak. So the first component is really looking at how well does a person speak English. Census collects data and reports data all the time on English ability. And it's really interesting to see. They break it down by 3 components, looking at speaks English well, or very well, speaks English well, speaks English not well, or not at all, which actually links itself back to this whole concept of linguistic isolation. And linguistic isolation really refers to families for whom which no one over the age of 14 speaks English at least very well. So for those of you that work, maybe support youth or have a large youth contingency, that the youth may speak English well because they've been here for so long, or the school system has been helping them, supporting them in the growth of their English language. But often when they're at home, the adults in the house do not speak English well. Or if they speak English, they may be able to understand English to an extent that is greater than the ability that they have to speak English. So always real important to find out that key piece about English ability.
We have a question.
And then if you find out that the English ability is not as developed as it might be in order to carry on some very critical conversations, then to find out, well, what is the language of preference, or what is the language that the family speaks in when they're not in a community situation, or even when they are in a community situation. What's the language that's most comfortable for them to speak in? And then also to find out what language is spoken at home gives you also a very good cue as to where the level of comfort may be around use of English language. And then always, since we have forms and things for people to fill out, whether it's a consent form, whether it's just to be able to receive services and supports, whether it's to be able to, have I lost you? Have you guys lost me?
We had our break, so we're good.
Just talking about our experiences and any insight that you have. A lot of our work with families that don't speak English is actually done through community partners who are very much in touch with those families. We sent them some material this year about our services as well as special ed that was translated into Arabic, because that's one of the primary languages in our state. And the school told us that a lot of the translated materials did them very little good because 90% of the refugee families that they were supporting weren't literate in their own language, so they couldn't read the material. But then their translators told them that, yes, that may be true, but if we get translated material, it's easier for us to convey that verbally if we're working off that model. So it turned out to be a good thing after all. I don't know what your experience has been, but.
Okay, so yes, I've heard the same thing about translation of documents. But there for a lot of people, remember when I was access to education to be able to have language when I was speaking specifically about English. The same thing is true, that we find often that families, for a variety of reasons, whatever maybe the economic situation was or the situation was, the war at the place, are often not able to read. And so for interpreters, it's often really a good thing for them to have a translated material. That way they can use that as the talking points to share the information that you hope to convey to the family. And I was beginning to share the story about a friend who spent a lot of money on getting materials translated because they have a large Chinese population in her state, spent a great deal of money getting a document translated. And the person who did the translation was college educated. So she prepared very good translation. When it shared with a community, they discovered the language that had been written in, the language level was very high, almost too high for the families to really meaningfully extract information from. So the lesson learned for her was to go back and do two things: to get the document translated and to have community input. The very families that she sought to receive the information have their input as to readability and understandability, but also to look at using some alternative formats. And one of the things that she did was to make some taped conversations of the same written material, and it's on a website and it accompanies the written document so that there's a little icon that people could click on and hear the spoken word as well as have the translated document present. So yes, there's a lot of variability in people's ability to even to read their language of origin. Yeah. Any other questions?
Go ahead. Just talk loud.
Oh, this is Albino Sandoval. I work for a community parent resource in New Mexico, and we predominantly serve parents of Native American children. In New Mexico, we have 22 tribes. 19 of those are Pueblos. Most of their languages aren't written, are more oral. Navajo is predominant, the predominant language spoken, and it's also written. We're in the process of working on translating our procedural safeguards in Navajo. We're working with a couple of associate professors from the university who are Navajo in translating that for us. And before we did that, we sort of surveyed and had discussion with our families from all of the tribes represented. And the preferred mode of receiving information in their languages was audio. They prefer to hear it in some form, either in DVD format, CD, or ways to put it on the internet, so they can click on it and hear the Navajo translation, or it translated in Keres language or the other respective languages spoken. And then the second preference was visual, to see somebody translating it in a DVD format with PowerPoint slides. And then the last preference was to have it in print, because they said they'd rather either hear it or see it before they spend the time in flipping through pages and reading it in print format. So we've taken that task on. So right now we're working on the audio portion of it. Then the next phase would be to record it on DVD format with PowerPoint slides. And then after that, to focus on the actual print as well. And so we sort of went into the community and asked and surveyed what their preferences were, instead of just giving them the written documentation and assuming that everyone knew how to read Navajo. And plus also respecting the other languages where the languages aren't written but are kept because of traditional purposes. Just kept oral, it's continued orally as well.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, I lost Albino towards the end, but I think the statement that he made about going to the community and asking for preferences around receiving information, the ways in which the community prefers to receive information is absolutely excellent. Number one, top suggestion to make. That way, you're really able to maximize your impact, because you would understand that once you have that feedback, the way that you put it together is going to target that audience and is going to meet their needs or their preferences for receiving information. We've heard the same thing in terms of doing some focus groups with Spanish-speaking populations here in the DC metro area in terms of preferred ways of receiving information. This is particularly information that had been put together around emergency preparedness. And so there was a similar suggestion that multiple things. That video or CD was one of the most viable ways of being able to get that information across. B, in-person sort of live conversations with pictures, graphics, manipulative, sort of modeling and being able to really show how to do this in community format seemed to be a way that families were used to already back at home. If we're specifically talking about emergency preparedness, that it wouldn't be unusual to have Red Cross representatives or representatives from the fire department or the police to come out to help people in person, face to face, hear and understand what steps you should take in terms of finding a designated place, going to higher ground, all of those pieces that are often in writing. Sam's also talked about having something quick and dirty, to use that phrase, but like a magnet or a pocket-sized booklet that they could use, something that had symbols and the phone numbers printed in large print, so that they would be able to have it either in the dad said in their lapel pocket or magnet format, so that it's in a stationary position all the time where people could get to it quickly and easily. So actually, community feedback around best ways to get information to them is really key and important. So I don't know, do you guys still have the slides up?
Yes, yeah, the slides are up, no problem.
Okay, so you tell me, we can do this two ways. As you can see, I've got a bunch of slides to share. But I also am enjoying this, the communication between each other. So I think I said before that this is a discussion. And so, yeah, I have some information, but I'm sure amongst yourselves and between yourselves, you have information and experiences and probably some seriously promising practices to share with each other. So again, I'm going to say, yes, we have the slides, but I'm encourage you to share with your peers in the room as well as with me, because I'm listening closely for things that I can take back and share with other people as well as also for my own information. So we can do some more slides and have some more conversation, or we can focus on conversation. Do you have a preference?
I have a question about self-assessment.
Yeah, why don't you wander over there so she gets a little better.
I just wanted to see if you might have some tools for self-assessment of our centers, especially those of us who have large geographic areas that might be very different from one part of the state to another. So
funny you should say that. Thank you. We finished up, let's see, about a year and a half ago now. We were working with family organizations to develop a cultural and linguistic competence organizational assessment for family organizations. So it's called CLCSOA, which it lives on our website, and it is free and available for any organization to use. In fact, there have been a number of family-to-family health information centers that have, actually a number of family-to-family health information centers, a number of Federation for Family and Children's Mental Health, as well as Family Voice State affiliate organizations that helped us in the development of the subscales that are on this tool. And it's probably one of our easiest tools in that you can use it. There's a guide that goes with it, but you can use it for small, like maybe a team of people, whether it's administrators or frontline staff. You would collect information and do this assessment within a number of small groups, as well as including families, to get their feedback and their understanding of the ways in which you provide services, linkages, parent-to-parent, materials, whatever the case may be. And it is maybe takes about 30 minutes to do. One of the F2Fs that I've been working with around beginning, they've been thinking about it, and they've been talking with their board and talking with their sort of management team to figure out exactly how much information they seek to collect, as well as doing it sort of in a couple of small steps. So their first step that they've been working on is really doing it internally with the management team. Then the next step was to do it with their board members. Then the next step is to engage a group of volunteers that work with them to collect that information, to take a look at it, to look at what are being viewed as the strengths of the organization, what are being viewed as the areas of growth, and then the next phase in their organizational assessment will really be to ask families to get that feedback. And so when you get all those pieces together and take a look at it, there's also in this tool something that helps you to figure out how this information will help you to plan for whether it's outreach, whether it's engagement, whether it's direct support, family-to-family support, whether it's training, whether it's involving youth. Whatever the feedback that you get, it helps you to sort of develop your strategic plan, to prioritize and develop your strategic plan, and to be able to move on from there. So that's just one, the CLCFOA. There are a number of self-awareness tools, individual self-awareness tools that are available on our website. There are a number of tools. There's one tool that looks at policy, just at policy, and looks at the cultural and linguistic competence implications for the policies that you have. And in terms of doing an organizational assessment, there are a number of facets that you can do. Some people do a review of their webpage to see just how accessible it is for the populations that they're aware of, that come to their website, as well as those, what might you include, or what might you add, or might you put things in different languages, or might you even add sound. The whole idea of adding sound to the information that's on your website can be gleaned by just doing a sort of systematic review in that way. So yes, there are tools, a number of tools available for doing organizational assessment, but there also are other ways of doing it that I'd be more than happy for anybody, any of you to contact me individually so that we could delve into the extent to which you want to do it and how you might get started. Does that work for you?
Yes, thank you.
Another question? Okay. So then, Roger, if you'll advance the next slide, I believe.
Okay, it's Race Definitions, Office of Management and Budget.
Right. So the reason that I'm giving you this is in terms of when you're collecting data, the Federal Office of Management and Budget has listed these categories, racial definitions, as the ones that you would ask about. So that's why I'm offering that to you, okay? And so if you look at it, they're ones that I'm sure you're pretty familiar with. Nothing new on those. Do advance to the next slide.
Okay.
Then you have a continuation of those definitions. So of particular interest is some other race. So I want to ask for a second. For your organization, are you collecting race, ethnicity, and language information?
Yes.
Yes.
They're saying yes.
Everybody says yes? Some people say yes. Hard to tell with the video. So what are you collecting? What are you asking? What are you collecting?
Somebody want to lead?
Oh, you can't talk.
She can't talk. She needs a translator.
Charmin, step up. I'm sitting here as TA.
Someone speak.
Regional people.
We're having a debate on who's going to step up and answer that
You
question.
need to pick someone, Wendy.
No fear. Okay. I'm going to my list. Glenda?
Linda. Perfect.
We have the government list on our parent intake forms. Many times they don't fill that out. And then we also have that same information on our training information when we're doing workshops. We have that same information on our training information when we do workshops, the intake forms.
Why don't you go sit in that chair right there? Then you'll be right next to the phone. Sorry to make you move. Don't trip.
Don't trip. We have the government list of requirements on our family intake forms. So when a staff person is talking to that person on the phone, they're supposed to ask that question. And sometimes I think people are uncomfortable doing that and it doesn't happen. Or sometimes families are reluctant to answer that question. We have that list on our parent intake forms that are distributed at training sessions. And that's at right now how we collect.
Someone else want to share? Okay, so maybe let's go this way. So while you have that information on training forms, while it's supposed to be asked over the phone, do you find that you're getting that question answered more or less? And it doesn't have to be you, Glenda, to answer. It could be anybody.
Just the same.
Yeah, so far.
So far,
It seems like it's pretty much the same response. We get probably more of that on the workshop forms than we do on the phone conversations. I think we get more accurate information. Part of that is because you're talking to people, you're encouraging them to fill out the form, you're seeing people. If they don't fill it out, maybe you can fill that out after the workshop. But I think people, when you're talking to a stranger on the telephone, the staff are uncomfortable asking those questions.
What do you think the level, and you're not the first one to say that. I mean, every time I have this conversation, I hear that a lot, that people are uncomfortable with asking that question. Why do you think that is? And again, it doesn't have to be you, Glenda, answering. Everybody.
I think partly it doesn't fit into the conversation. When you're having that kind of personal conversation with someone about a school issue or an issue that they're having, you're focused on that topic and you're focused on that conversation, and it feels kind of less personal and intrusive to say, yes, and I understand what you're going through. By the way, what race are you? It just doesn't flow with the conversation.
I understand exactly what you're saying. So there are a number of tools that I want us to be able to get to in this conversation to help you with that. So because there's an organization called HERIT that has done a lot of work with, they started out working to support hospitals and hospital staff in asking questions of race and ethnicity.
What did she say the
And
name
so
of
they've
that
come up with an entire toolkit to help.
Wendy?
Yes.
The question was, what did you say the name of that organization was?
HRET. Thank you, because I didn't hear the question at all. In fact, Roger.
Yes.
Looking for the slide.
Yeah, just tell me the number and I can go to it.
Is it the Health Research and Educational Trust? Is it the Health Research and Educational Trust?
Is it the Health Research and Educational Trust?
That's exactly what it is.
It's on that slide, Roger.
It's on
Which
the
one?
slide.
The one
The
you're
one you
on.
just, yeah, it's at the very bottom of the slide.
Oh. Let's get back to the slide.
So, actually, we'll get to it. How about?
Oh, there it is.
There, it's right at the bottom.
Yeah.
Health research and education.
Slide it is because they're not numbered. I just have them on pages, giving me the page number, but not the slide.
So we have it, Wendy.
We got it.
You got it. Okay. So this particular website, this particular organization actually came up with something called the Disparities Toolkit, specifically to address collecting race, ethnicity, and language data. And so the wonderful thing about it is that on this website provides a script. But before even the script, it provides information about how to go about developing your rationale. Because one of the things that they found out through their own research was that individuals feel uncomfortable about asking, but it's also because they're not sure why they're asking this data. Families sometimes feel uncomfortable providing that data because they don't always know what you're going to do with it. Why are you asking me this? What does it have to do with the services and supports that I need from you, that you seek to give to me? So that HERIT in their toolkit have come up with a way of helping organizations or individuals to think through, why are you collecting this data? Why is it key? Why is it important?
Wendy, this is such good information. Just a related question. We also have to sometimes ask for information about income, and that can be equally difficult for our staff. Does that toolkit get into that as well?
Yeah.
Hello?
Hey, Wendy, we're back.
How much did you hear what I said?
Not much. Probably not the last 3 minutes or so at least.
Yeah, probably the last 3 minutes.
Okay, so did you hear me when I was talking about the fact that there are 22 states that have requirements for race, ethnicity, and language data?
No, we didn't get any of that.
Okay, so I actually was naming those 22 states. So I'll do it again. See if you hear your state in the naming. So I'll go from the bottom up this time. Wisconsin, Virginia, Vermont, Texas, Tennessee, South Carolina, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, New York, New Mexico, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Missouri, Massachusetts, Maryland, Louisiana, Georgia, Florida, Delaware, Connecticut, California, and Arizona. And then I was talking about why do we have a need to collect this data? Well, usually our funding source will ask us, right, to reply back. But also the idea that this data, race, ethnicity, and language data, has a lot of information, valid and reliable information to help us to do a number of things. So to measure the quality of our services or the quality of care that we're providing, to identify differences or disparities in care or services, so maybe we're seeing more of one group of people and less of another, to help us to improve our family-centeredness, our approach to providing family-centered care, to help us to figure out some interventions or activities that would be targeted to specific groups or targeted towards improving our outreach and engagement, to help us with planning. Who are we going to reach out to? Who are we already serving, and who are we already serving well? And who are we missing? Who are we not reaching? So it would help us in terms of our quality improvement efforts as well, and also in terms of tracking progress over time. For whenever you collect this data, maybe one given point in time, and see who you're serving, who's in your catchment area that you're reaching, who's in your catchment area that you're missing, to help you plan for engaging with those people that you're missing. But anyway, the whole idea of collecting this data and the idea of being able to really, really accurately reflect back to families why you're asking that. So the studies are showing that families are more likely to answer your questions about race, ethnicity, and language when they understand why you're asking it, how you're going to be able to, how you're going to use it, whether or not by self-identifying it's going to have any consequence for them, right? When we think about families who may be in the U.S. who have lesser documentation, or documentation that's expired, or no documentation, sometimes when we ask those questions, it sends off alarm bells for them. Like, is ICE going to come and pick me up because I provide you with this information? Right? And so we have to be mindful of that. But really, to help them feel secure in knowing that the information that they're going to provide you is not going to be shared with the mass public. You're not going to tell their neighbors. You're not going to share with anyone else. But really, to help them know that you're going to keep that information very confidential with limited access. Only those people who absolutely need it to help support them, whether it's around education, whether it's around a health issue, whether it's around linking them to community services that you feel will match their areas of need and preference, to be able to state that clearly, because research does show that when families understand that, then they're more at ease with sharing that information with you. And then in terms of the literature or the research, when looking at staff, that staff are more likely to ask those questions when they understand themselves why they're collecting that data and what it's going to be used for, and when they have a safe environment to discuss their level of comfort or discomfort with asking these questions. And also that there's some level of training in place to help staff feel ready and prepared to naturally fit these questions into their conversation. And sometimes that has to do with having a script in place so that everyone answers the same way when families ask, why are you asking me this? That everyone has the same understanding about why, what's the rationale, why are you asking, how we're going to use it, who's going to be privy to this information. And so for the most part, when we're asking this data, it's not just to be able to respond to our funders, but again, all those reasons that I gave previously about helping you to figure out who you're serving, who you're missing, and how you might be able to tailor what you're doing in terms of outreach and engagement to make it resonate for those people that you speak to provide support. And so a lot of the rest of the slides have to do with, well, where do you keep this information on a form? Are those forms those data entry forms, are they locked away someplace so that you'd be able to incorporate that into your conversation or your script? Yes, we keep that information and it's only available to the people who are going to be working with you, and otherwise it's kept in safe environments. No one else will have it. And that when you have thought about together as a group, what's your rationale? What are you gonna tell families about why you're collecting this data? How are you gonna even seek their input about what feels comfortable about responding to that question? What would they need to have in place to feel comfortable responding to such a question? To be able to readily address those concerns as offered up by families, to have that all down pat, and that everyone is aware of it, and even practicing collecting that data. So again, that parent toolkit gives you all this information. And there's even sort of a video walkthrough to help, or even slides. So say you go back home, Nebraska group, or individuals from New Mexico who are going to maybe get together after this conversation to think about and talk amongst yourselves about how is it that you're collecting this data, and how is it, what's your thought process, how will you be preparing yourself for getting it together to be able to report back to staff, to be able to engage in training, and to be able to come up with the ways in which you're going to share this information with families. Because it's looking like more and more, for as uncomfortable as it may be in terms of asking these questions, that these questions are key for funders. Because as we look towards always trying to address disparities, to be able to say who you're reaching, and to show a diverse group of people that you're serving or supporting, whether it's diverse geographically, diverse racial or ethnically, diverse by language, is going to be more and more important. And as you are also thinking about doing engagement and providing services and doing outreach and seeking volunteers or being able to expand the population groups that you serve, also to be able to be planful about it. So recognizing that what may work well as an engagement strategy for Group X may not work so well for Group Y. So if you have the information about who you're serving and who you seek to serve, collecting this racial and ethnic data is going to just be more of a catalyst, more of a support to you, not only in reporting, but also in moving forward with your own culturally and linguistically competent approaches to doing it. So are we currently on the HERIT slide?
Which one?
HRET. Are we on the Disparities Toolkit slide, or where are you?
I was on the Disparities Toolkit slide.
Okay, so if you move one more forward.
Okay. This chart that you see is also from the Office of Management and Budget. And remember when we were talking about the granular ethnicities or granular reporting of who someone is, that smaller information is helpful in making some determinations about linkages and supports and approaches. This is what OMB offers up in terms of the subcategory exploration, or the more granular information by those larger groups that they're offering or requesting that we use in collecting data. So for an example, if you look under if someone tells you you're collecting data and you ask them about their ethnicity and they say that they're Pacific Islander, then they could also be able to tell you whether it's Chamorro, whether it's Palauan, whether what exactly within those groups are they Fijian, what's their ethnicity, their more granular ethnicity, to be able to collect that data. So if you move to the next slide. Okay.
That OMB also offers you the opportunity that when you're asking people about their race and ethnicity, that you could also say, maybe they responded to being Hispanic, But there's also OMB offers you the opportunity to ask them Hispanic then by race. And you could also say Hispanic, Latino declined, some other race, unavailable or unknown. All of these categories are available for you to put. So it's basically so that you don't have an empty space. There have been conversations that I've had with other groups where I ask people, okay, if the family wasn't, maybe they were in a crisis situation and you didn't feel comfortable asking about the race or ethnicity, what did you do? And I've had people say, well, I looked at their address and I went to the census tract and I saw that on the census tract it says that it's an African American or a black neighborhood, so I put down that they were black. Or I could tell from their voice that they were Hispanic. Or the last name sounded like a certain ethnicity and I put it down. So we branched then into a whole different conversation about assumptions that we make about people based upon the sound of their voice, based upon the last name that they have, or that we think that we can attribute a race or an ethnicity or an ethnic group based upon something interesting. And then I always use the example of a friend that I had in high school whose last name was S-T-E-E-L-E. His first name was Santiago, but his last name was S-T-E-E-L-E. And asked people what they thought his ethnicity was. So Steele, right, that's S-T-E-E-L-E, what do you think that ethnicity or that background would be? Anybody?
English.
Hello, can you guys still hear me? I'm thinking that you can't hear me. So what do you think about Steele? S-T-E-E-L-E.
It's American. It's still European. African American.
European.
African American.
Yeah, Santiago Steele was born in Colombia. The last name Steele doesn't sound very Hispanic. You might think, okay, Santiago, but there's a lot of people. Orlando, when you think about names that in our English vocabulary that people are named a number of things. So there's tons of people that I've met whose names are Orlando. There are tons of people that I've met whose first name may sound like one thing, but their ethnicity is totally different. So I used that example because they thought Steele that he was of European background. Someone even said maybe he was German, and that they just given him that name, or he was using that Santiago just as a, that was a name that he'd chosen. But just for the example that by trying to use someone's name to figure out who they are can totally miss all the nuances and all the cultural pieces. And even to say, well, I heard their voice and they sounded like X population. But that doesn't work so well, especially with youth and younger folks. When you see them and you hear them adopting little pieces of different cultural groups to make their persona. So how would you be able to then listen to someone and try to determine what their race and ethnicity would be?
Question. In leading ourselves or our agencies forward in this process of actually becoming more cultural competent, we have to distinguish between what we're required to collect data on and what we may collect data on. And the OMB categories that you shared with us, I'm thinking, but I don't know this, are not the same as the categories that the U.S. Census Bureau is using.
Well,
and I don't know which ones we could or should be using versus ones we may be using. Can you speak to any of that?
The OMB and the census categories are actually the same.
They are, okay.
So where the variation is that on the census form, on the last census form, it allows you to self-identify. If you said Asian, you could say what country. If you said Hispanic, you could say what you could name a country of origin, and that gets to the granular data. So yes, census doesn't necessarily, if you're using census and the OMB definitions for the racial or ethnic categories, it can be somewhat limiting. It doesn't always let you get the more granular data. So the suggestion that I make to organizations is that yes, definitely collect what you're required to collect, but that doesn't stop you from asking the other question to get down to, as my mom would say, the nitty gritty, to really find out what the cultural background is, because it's the cultural background more than the larger group that's going to help you to get a perspective and an understanding about culturally based preferences for services and support, and particularly about ways in which to outreach or engage with families and communities. So it's not to collect one or the other, but to collect what you have to collect, but also there's nothing to stop you from asking the other questions. So also on the parent toolkit offers you an opportunity to look at crafting your forms, ways in which you would craft your form so that you get the required information, but also are able to leave blank so that you can also collect the more granular or the very specific data as well. Does that help?
Yes, they're nodding loudly.
Because now you just the screen I see, you guys are just frozen, so I can't. There's no movement. I can't tell.
You know, and then we make it a kind
It's got very cold in here.
When we offer these categories around race and Hispanic ethnicity categories, they also recommend, though, again, to collect that granular data, and that your organization as an individual organization can also select some categories that really represent the populations in your service area. And that's why they provide that big grid of those other listings of other categories, so that you can choose from that and sort of personalize it. And then again, you could have the open-ended response as well. So if there's, and it often happens that if you look at census data, that you'll see some folks, when you're asked to say, who to identify, may put other and not fill in what are the components of their other, or more than one race, that they may not put in those components, which are more than one race. And you could always put in please specify, or you could ask them, please can you be specific? Can you tell me what if you mark more than one race, or if they replied, oh, I'm more than one race? What are the components of that mixture? What are the components of that race?
Hey, Wendy.
Yes.
We have about 3 minutes left. If you want to, do some closing thoughts, or where we go from here, or maybe a little bit about your next session.
So closing thoughts. My closing thoughts are really around the importance of collecting this data, and really I can't stress more than I have already the importance of going to that website and checking out those tools, because they really are helpful. And for everyone that I've recommended those tools to, they've come back to tell me how much it helped them as not only individuals but as groups in really being able to target their responses, or not even respond, but even to be able to target their own reasoning why, and to have their training to use the slides on that website.
Go to the site, and then also if you have questions or want feedback about whatever your experience is or whatever you're thinking to process through, you can always reach me toll free at 800-788-2066. Okay. So in terms of some organizations that have used the toolkit and that have moved forward, I would offer up the name of an individual. I don't have her number in front of me, but I would say for those of you who are F2Fs, Diana Autent at Span, New Jersey is someone to talk to. Juno Duenas in California, Family Voices in California is someone else that I'm sure would be happy to speak with you about it. And I would be more than happy to forward to the TA Center some other promising practices that I'm aware of, and perhaps they would be able to disseminate them to you.
We would appreciate that.
Okay. So thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your sessions. And for those of you who may tune in later, I look forward to hopefully things working as we hope, as we plan.
We're clapping for her.
Thank you.